I'm going to talk today about responsible and effective vibe coding. So with a particular focus on building consistent, beautiful user interfaces, utilizing AI-assisted development, and maintaining coherent design, and also like when you want to build rapidly prototyping and building MVPs. A little bit about me. I'm a lead engineer at Zork. I've been with Zork for over 2 years. I actually left and came back again. So I've been building React apps since 2019, and I've consulted on quite a lot of greenfield projects, particularly with startups in Singapore. So I'm quite lucky to have worked on quite a few greenfield React web apps. So yeah, I think that means that I spend a lot of time thinking about how to bootstrap applications quickly, and especially now we have AI to help us. Like, it's been quite a game changer, right? The rise of AI-assisted development. So now we have AI tools like V0, Claude. We even have tools like Lovable, etc., right, where you can basically just put in a prompt and get an entire application. But I think I think it's important to understand the spectrum of when I say vibe coding, because I think it's become a bit of a buzzword. So if I show what I mean by this, right, like if we have this is the vibe coding spectrum, right, and we maybe have on the far left Vim, right, like I don't want to use my mouse, right, and then on the far end we have proper vibe coding as it was intended as a idea, right, where it's Lovable, right, you just put in a prompt to get everything out. I think the tools that I talk about today, like V0, Claude Code, again, Claude Code can be anywhere, right? You can do it, probably here, or you can do it here, right? You can be I don't care about the code, just do it, right? And then, traditional vibe coding, as the word was originally intended, I think means you just basically put in the prompt and don't look at the code and just go with the vibes. That's not really what I recommend doing. And I think that's why I say, responsible, ethical, whatever. Not ethical is probably not the right word, but yeah, responsible. Vibe coding is more along the lines of still being involved in the process, not completely handing over the driver's seat to the AI, right? Cool. Common pitfalls with vibe coding. Basically, a lot of the time, you might have noticed this if you tried it yourself. You end up with an app which looks like it was designed by 5 different people, right? You might have 5 amazing screens, but they look completely incoherent, right? Also, a common pitfall is you use the AI to build everything from scratch, and that starts off very simple because you might think I just need a button, right? But even a button is actually very complicated in a website, right? Because a button has hover states, on click, on disabled, on whatever, right? And obviously if you just ask the AI for a button, you don't give it any of what you want, it will just give you the simplest version of that. And then someone else builds another page, they make different assumptions, right? You end up with 2 different buttons completely, right? So this is a common pitfall, right? Is you end up with beautiful individual pages that fail to work in a cohesive product, right? Common solutions to this, which is not really new, right? We did this before we had AI, right? Is you have a style guide, and this can be in Markdown. So you can literally have a bunch of Markdown, use padding 4 pixels. We have these colors for our action versus call to action versus navigation, and just a load of Markdown, right? Another one is you have a component style page. So a little bit like Storybook, or even more primitive than that, you just put a page in your application and you call it internal components page. You don't have to broadcast it to the website. And you tell the model, if you cannot find a component on this page, then make one that looks similar and ask me or something, right? Assemble new pages out of the components I've given you here. This is how we do tables, this is how we do buttons, etc. What if someone's already done a lot of that for you, and there exists a library of beautiful coherent components that you can just use, right? And there is. So I think a good introduction to some of these tools is a product called V0 by Vercel. Vercel, if you don't know, they're the guys who made Next.js. And it's specifically, they actually use their own custom model, specifically trained on Next.js. And they really, honestly, these are the guys who kind of pushed me into the idea of thinking in this way, because I see what's possible with their tool. And then I'm like, okay, cool, how can I actually emulate that, right? Do I have to use that tool? I have to say the tool they've made is pretty amazing. So I think the good thing about it is it utilizes production-ready components. So you're basically just assembling stuff, right? So the AI is not making the button. The AI is saying, I need a button, and the button you get is one which is like a good button, which someone else has slaved over making, testing and whatever, right? So yeah. Do I have a demo here? No. Okay, so yeah, the underlying like primitives of using, prerequisites of using v0, this is the solution that I'll show later as well if you're not using v0. I think, honestly, I'm very lucky because this is the way I was already building web apps. And then suddenly Vercel came along with this tool that already fit very well into my workflow, right? So yeah, ShadCN, I don't know if has anyone heard of it? Okay, nice, cool. It's not just a component library, right? You might think, okay, it's just a bunch of components. You don't really think of it like that. ShadCN has actually a CLI, and the CLI you will use to add components to your code base. So you say like import button or whatever. That button then lives in your code base, right? And so it's a bit different to having just importing a load of components like, for example, like material UI or something, right? Because those components actually live in your code base. And the idea is that it's kind of pushing you into a situation where you build your own component library, right? It's very basic, the stuff that they have in there. They just assemble a bunch of primitives and then use Tailwind for styling. I think the really good thing about it is it has these, I would say, pure functional components, right? So they're building blocks. As opposed to like something like Material UI, it has a lot of inheritance. How you display a certain component on a certain page might depend on some theme defined somewhere else. A lot of the ShadCN components, they're more like Lego bricks, which you assemble, which is why I found AI models understand it very well, because they just use the context of those bricks that you're assembling without reaching out and doing something weird. I think you pretty much have to use Tailwind in the stack, which is another styling system. And then Next.js is optional, but you will get best results with Next.js because if you're using v0, that is, because like v0 has its own custom model trained on Next.js. So yeah, I can give you a quick demo. So throughout this presentation, I'm actually regularly going to be showing the same kind of idea, just presented several times in an app. So basically here, what I did is I said to v0, I have this massive prompt. I used ChatGPT to make this prompt, obviously. I was just basically saying, it doesn't come out very well there, but I was basically saying like, hey, I want to build an app which is like for reviewing, like using AI to review pull requests or review issues in GitHub, right? So something AI themed. So we can see here, I just pasted in like UX flows, pages, everything I want. You know, there should be a page for like seeing issues. There should be a settings page, whatever. And you can see this is one shot, right? And it took about 4 minutes, right? I did a pretty good job, right? It looks like, obviously you'd have to click through to see if everything's working properly, but like as far as a coherent UI is looking, everything kind of looks like it was built by the same team using the same kind of ideas, right? So yeah, it works pretty well. And another thing to mention is like, if you want to integrate this into your code base, obviously, so basically when you start with v0, it just gives you a blank template, you can put in a prompt, whatever. Putting this into your code base, they have you can download it as a zip file, but they also have this very nice ShadCN that I was talking about earlier. This whole thing becomes like a ShadCN component. So you can actually run this code in your code base and it will merge that into your code base, right? It's a very primitive merge. It will replace entire files, right? So it's not doing a proper like Git merge, right? But it's actually pretty good that you can bring those components in, even if you have like 5 different components, you're not just copy pasting everything in, right? And you'll notice quickly here that if I actually go to the code you'll see that like it imports a lot of stuff here from like components UI badge, right? And then you'll see here, when I actually look at my components directory, there's no UI folder there. So you might think like, what the hell's going on here, right? Because it's importing components that don't exist, right? And that's where ShadCN is coming in again, right? Because when you actually import this into your code base, that's when ShadCN is going to kick in and say, hey, I need all these components, right? So everything you see here is generated by AI, but everything relies on these underlying primitives of like these Lego bricks for assembling stuff. That's what ShadCN is providing. So you're not creating a button from scratch, right? Where's my presentation gone? Okay. Full screen. Yeah, so I don't have time for this demo, but if you are interested, like, okay, this is cool and all, but like, how do I use this in my own code base? Then I recommend I actually have a GitHub repository where you can follow and do yourself. It's really, like, I actually migrated this from Material UI. It's pretty much as simple as installing shadcn and then, yeah, rewriting your components. I really think, like, pretty much any project would benefit. Obviously, if you have like 6 years of legacy code base, it's going to be a tough slog, right? But the speed at which you can move with shadcn, not necessarily v0, but shadcn is a very good component library. So if you're interested in migrating a project, then you can have that. Yeah, but then, okay, cool. So yeah, like so far, it looks very much like Lovable or like Replit, right? We just start from scratch. So how do you then use that, like if you're building components which you then want to iterate on and then have in your code base, etc. So I'd say for this, like, I don't know how much like React knowledge we have in here, but like you should really use v0 to create dumb components, right? So I will always give in the prompt, like, I will pass in everything to control what you're building me, and you can even give it the API as well, right? So that basically what you end up with is a component which has all of its external state passed into it, right? And if you do that, copying and pasting from the web browser into your local environment, especially when you use those commands, is very easy, right? Because I can show you a quick example of that. Like I don't think I have time to show the full thing of me copying it in, but if we take a look at this, so this is an app which I have running for like making storybooks, passion project I have, whatever. If I look at me then designing it in v0, and I go to view here, then you can see that I very quickly, like, I copied and pasted the component I had, which I originally created from there, which originally you can see looks like this. And then I just say, hey, give it the different vibe, right? And then it gives you a new version, right? And then you can run the command, put it into your code base. And because, if I just show some of the code very quickly here, because everything I've come in here, it says like, I'm going to pass in my characters, I'm going to pass in the actions that you provide, right? And the actions are like here. So on favorite, on create, on whatever, right? Then that means that you can basically just swap out those components very quickly, because you're not like, you should never have in your v0 like reaching out to APIs and stuff, right? This is the same thing you would do if you had a separate team doing your design system, right? You wouldn't say like, hey, I need you to reach out to my API. You would just say, give me a table and I'll control it from outside. I'll give you a function for on filter, on whatever, on export, right? So if you build components like that, it's quite easy to copy paste between. But I would say it still feels like a little bit of a hack, right? Because that's not really like, ideally you would want to have that in your local environment. So just more things about v0 quickly before I talk a bit more about that. So they have their own custom model, as I mentioned already, and it is trained on Next.js. So it's not using ChatGPT, they actually trained it, right? So it's much more targeted for doing exactly that task. And you can see this full video here. So yeah, some trade-offs for using v0. So advantages, it gives you a consistent starting point. And I think it gives you a starting point is amazing, right? If you don't, I've noticed that v0 is very good at like, I don't know what I want, just show me some examples, right? Like, it's very good at doing that. So if you really have like, sometimes you have a bit paralysis by analysis, you don't know where to start, it's really good for that. It's also going to be up to date with any kind of Next.js stuff that you're building with. So let's say Next.js introduced some killer feature, right, which is like going to completely revolutionize and simplify everything. Every model trained before today is not going to know about it, right? So if Next.js can also update their own model and with their context for that feature, that's going to be very good too. So that's another reason why it's pretty good. So I put this one, workflow separation, as a pro and a con, right? Because I think what is quite nice is you can imagine this is quite an easy sell for using on a client project potentially. Because as you saw, I'm generating the components in the browser and then moving them manually into my code base. So I'm not handing over the entire code base to OpenAI and saying, just make it nice, right? Which you imagine clients that are going to be very delicate about just giving the entire code base over, right? So you're really just operating with the AI at the intersection between new stuff, right? Also, imagine your PM being like, hey, I have this idea for this new table, and then you prompt away, and then you share. You can share the links and then bring it in, right? It's quite a nice thing to be able to visualize entire UX flows directly in the browser. So one disadvantage though is I've noticed it creates a lot of code, like probably more than you need. So it really tries to just go for the finished products first try, right? And you might even end up like being a slave to it because it comes up with like new features where you're like, oh, it's actually quite cool, I should do that, right? But you kind of lose track because you're trying to build an MVP and then suddenly it's giving you like 10 features which are really cool, but like now you have more code that you have to maintain, right? So yeah, So what if we could do something like this, but we could do it in our local environment, right? So we want to have a similar sort of amazing, like first, almost one-shot, great UX flow, but we want to be able to do it in locally. So, I mean, the first thing to try is like, what happens if we just tell Claude Code or Cursor or whatever, like give me the same, I'll give it the same prompt and see what happens, right? So I've got that here. So in this one, shadcn raw, I think it's on localhost 3000. Yeah, this one. So this is what it came up with, right? So you can see again, we have this sign in with GitHub thing, and it did all right. Like definitely not as well. Like on first looks, it's okay. Like the pages are immediately broken though, so that's not great. And then like I think even the back button, when I go to all tasks, I think I get, oh, that one works. Yeah, but okay, again, errors, right? And you can see that generally like the layout of the components is not very nice, right? So yeah, that's a bit of a problem. So yeah, that's what happens. And the reason why this is happening is because Claude Code, which is the model that I used to do this with, so the CLI thing from Claude from Anthropic, doesn't really know about how to assemble shadcn components, right? So every time you try and do it, it's just trying to look through, like, have I ever seen anything like this before? And then trying to come up with the best approximation of what it should look like. So the solution to this is an MCP. Hands up if you know what an MCP is. I guess, yeah, quite a lot of people here, right? Yeah, cool. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. The simplest way of explaining it is like giving a toolbox to your model, right? So you're basically, I mean, the common example is like a model has no idea what the current weather is in Singapore, right? So if you tell your model, hey, there's a function you can ask what the current weather is in Singapore, it's going to use that to then get up-to-date weather information. And it looks like it came up with it itself, right? So you're giving extra functionality to your model. And obviously it matters in this case because it dramatically improves the efficiency of your model in terms of making these AIs, right? So it's very common now, especially for new, like anyone who's trying to make some groundbreaking new React library, new component library, new anything in TypeScript and whatever, it's almost essential that they'll provide an MCP with it because it makes coding with it, AIs can understand. Because imagine you make some new thing, even if it's the best thing ever, right? If the AI, people nowadays are expecting to be able to use AI to make code, and if you don't provide some way of that they can do that easily, no model trained before now is going to know about your new amazing tool, right? So that's why MCPs are incredible. It also saves you tokens and ultimately money, right? Because Claude will very quickly max out the tokens it's using. So if you give it an MCP where it can hone in exactly on the context it needs without having to always search the web, you're going to end up with a faster and also cheaper developer experience. So yeah, in terms of adding an MCP, I mean, it's incredibly simple. You can just like, you just basically go shadcn MCP, take this link, it will give you a nice command. It even will tell you, depending on which, how you're doing your coding, right? So this is the one for Claude Code, and you can see that, there you go. So it'll just, whatever model you're using, whatever way of coding, it'll tell you how to integrate it here. So let's do another comparison, right? Let's see, so we've added the MCP in my second demo, here, and I think it's running on localhost 3002. There we go, so let's see how it did. So again, we have this continue with GitHub button. Quite a lot better, right? Like it already can see the alignment's better, everything's working. It kind of looks, again, coherent. These are just hydration issues, don't worry about that. So that's when the server and the client page doesn't match. It's a horrible problem that has in Next.js. But yeah, so honestly, I still don't quite like this one as nice as the V01. I think the V01 was a bit better. Can we see for comparison how it looked? Like pretty similar though, right? Like I think I remember like I think the hover states and stuff were a bit better in the V0 version. I think on the one that I have here, which is this one here, like we don't have as much. Oh, you see like no hover states on the dashboard up here, right? But like generally looks quite nice, right? So massive improvement, and this is again one shot. Right, like literally the same prompt. You can see in the code base later what exactly the prompt was. It's literally 200 lines of like exactly what UX flows I want, right? Like, so yeah, much better. So you can quickly see like if I use Claude Code, how can you see how this works, right? So I have here my Claude Code running. And basically, you can see if it's working properly by, I actually just ask Claude Code, like, give me a list of ShadCN components, right? And if it does, and it says here, like, hey, I'm going to call this tool now, then your MCP is working fine, right? And in Claude Code itself, you can basically, you can go, I think it's /MCP. Just by running that command that I already showed, you can see we have an MCP, right? So that's how you know it's working. You can ask it questions. How do I implement a button? That kind of stuff, right? So yeah, good. Beyond one-shot generation, right? So let's imagine instead that you want to create like a more of a strong workflow for this, right? So for complex UI flows, a structured workflow can produce better results, right? So basically, the idea here is you can create in Claude, but in also other ways of like cursor, etc. You can create separate agents, right? So you can have, for example, your requirements analyzer agent where you say, I'm going to give you a spec. You tell me exactly which ShadCN components you're going to use to create it. Another agent, you tell it, do the research. And another agent, you say, use the output from the first two agents, now go and build this, right? However, I would say don't believe everything you see on the internet, because I tried this, it did not produce better results, right? So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of stuff online. It's called spec-driven development. A lot of people are raving about it. But from my personal experience, I honestly got as good at, if not better results, just prompting and using MCP. I still might use this because a good way of doing like this is you're basically documenting as you go. So a problem with using Claude or with using any other thing is you lose that context when you log out of that session, right? So imagine 2 weeks later, you come back in and you're like trying to iterate somehow on that thing. At least in this approach, you already have some markdown files saying like, this is what I was trying to do and this is where I was at with that task, right? So you imagine, and also like Claude, after a while, will go to this context compression thing where it basically will stop having certain knowledge because it has to, like, it's like if you've been talking to someone all night, eventually they're going to forget what you said at the beginning of the evening, right? So yeah. So basically, that's where it could help, but for me personally, I've not had a lot of success using this. So yeah, but I'd be curious to try some other stuff, right? There's some directions I could go in here. So I was quite interested to try the new Chrome DevTools MCP. So it's a bit like Playwright, but even better, apparently. I haven't tried it yet, but basically the idea is that the model can actually see what the web page is looking like that it's building. And then also, basically getting this kind of self-checking idea going. Right? It's like makes a change, checks it works, makes a change, check it works. I'd like to try. I'd also like to try other stuff. So all the examples here were done with Claude just because I found I generally got better results than using Cursor. But I would also like to try with the OpenAI Codex way of doing things because I think it would be cheaper. And I think it's weird. Like, I actually think GPT-5 is the best model, but I think Claude Code has the edge on like using the model effectively. So, but I'd quite like to try Codex because I've heard from a friend that it's basically like the best of both worlds, right? And also cheaper because Claude is very expensive. So yeah, that's what I'd quite like to try next. So some bonus tools. There's this tool called TweakCN, which is pretty cool. So basically what it allows you to do is you can basically log in. So this is the normal ShadCN components. And you can come in and say, for example, like I want my thing to look like Claude, or I want my thing to look like Bold Tech, right? Bit garish, but whatever. Okay, let's try Doom 64. Okay, cool. So if you want to do this, again, with that nice little command. So this is just about theming. This is not about adding components necessarily, but you can basically come into your, my demo here. Yeah, this is the MCP one. I can run this command and it's going to retheme the app for me into that theme. So if I now go to my local host and reload the screen, we should see, okay, it probably wasn't different enough for us to see a lot of difference, but yeah, it's rethemed it, right? So some of these things have changed around now. Like it doesn't look like it did a minute ago because it's basically changed some of the colors, etc. right? So yeah, cool. So yeah, that's quite a nice thing to use. Then what else? Go back to here. And, okay. But this is something that I'm very excited about. This is very new. So custom registries with ShadCN. So basically what they've done is they have this registries library here. And when you use that, it's just extensions. Think of it like plugins. Plugins, extensions to ShadCN. So people building libraries on top, because as I mentioned already, ShadCN has a lot of primitives. It's actually pretty basic under the hood. It's pulling in a lot of like stuff from other libraries. So you can actually extend this yourself, or you can use other extensions. So to demo that, what I actually did is go back into using Claude again and taking my example here, which is, this one. So in my prompt for this one, I basically, so if you want to see if you can actually use this yourself, follow the instructions on that slide. But basically what you can do is go to the registry here, right? Go to the registry. The registry has a bunch of like nice component libraries. Not all of these work, it's very much in beta. But if we take the Magic UI one, for example, click in here, then you can see there are a bunch of components that they already show you, right? And to see if it's going to work, you can actually run the install command, which is here. So you can see it's again integrated with the ShadCN CLI very nicely. If you run that in your code base and you see that it's added it to the registries, which is in the components file, it's added as it as a registry here, you're good to go, right? And then your MCP is going to know about it as well, right? So all I did here is I went into my model, into my prompt, and I said, this is a bit of a primitive prompt, but it basically says implement the same app, the one in the markdown file, which I've been showing the whole time. I really like Magic UI components, use as many as possible. And also check your work with the MCP ShadCN, because the ShadCN MCP even has functionality for checking. So it has functionality for list the components you have, tell me how to make them, and then check that they're done correctly, right? And we can see the output here, which I think should be running on, port 3.3. This is what we get. And I think this is probably the best one so far. So I think that's quite an interesting login page as well. So it looks like this, but again, one shot, right? Continue with GitHub, log in. Like we get this nice little counter up thing. Like let's look at the issues page. Like I think it looks pretty nice, right? And then I also tried the same thing just to try using a different library. So this one is Ace-temetry, I think it's called. pm install. Again, run it. Cool. So this is a bit insane, but come on, one shot, right? And all the flying stuff around, right? But you can see it has this crazy, like when I reload the page, you can see it has this nice blur effect coming in. It's not great, it's not perfect, right? You see this alignment there, and that's just because like ShadCN didn't do this. They're basically just allowing a plugin to extend it, right? So any issues coming from here, and especially you can see it doesn't quite work as well as the out-of-the-box ShadCN components. They're relying on whatever information is in the registry. So the way this works is basically you define your extensions, you integrate with the ShadCN CLI, it will use that information to extend the MCP to know what registries you have. You have to provide custom, it's like writing documentation for how to use your components, etc. Right? Obviously, I didn't write any of this, but someone else has done it, and you can just use it. And you can see, what would my app look like in a retro field, right? This is in beta, this has only been out for a few weeks, right? But I'm very excited to see where this goes, right? Because you can very quickly be like, what's the retro version of my AI? What's the version from this? Whatever, you can use whatever component library which extends this. And I'm really excited to see where this goes. So you can see that's the prompt that I gave it. Why registry is exciting. So firstly, you're extending AI capabilities. I think this is a very good use case for MCPs, as I've mentioned already. But I'm also excited about what we could do with this. Like a few years ago in Standard Charter, Vlad and I, mainly Vlad, were building a component library for Standard Charter, right? Imagine if we had this now, right? Like you're internally in the client, you extend ShadCN, so you get a lot of stuff for free already. You have the CLI, you can say add component, add whatever. And now you have an MCP where you can, use whatever, if they have like an on-prem version of ChatGPT running inside Windsurf, Cursor, whatever, but you can give it an MCP to show how to use your components. Obviously, there's nothing really new here, right? You could write that MCP yourself from scratch, right? But the fact that ShadCN already is doing a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting for you that you can just extend, I think it's a very good way, and I'm excited to see how this goes next. Key takeaways. Guardrails are essential. Leverage existing components. Don't get your AI to create everything from scratch. I would say if you're interested in this stuff, start with V0. Like, it's a very good way of showing you, like, to encompass some of the techniques I'm talking about here. And still, like, it's still such a good tool. Like, they're so fast, right? Like, a lot of the Claude runs here took like maybe 10 minutes. The V0 ones take like 5 minutes. And yeah, like, because they're very tight, they have their own custom model, they're very specific on doing that job well, right? So I still think it's a great tool to utilize. So yeah, using MCPs locally, that applies even if you're doing vibe coding in any language. Like, if there's whenever you're integrating a new package, see if there's an MCP which is going to tell your model how to use it. So structure complex flows, I put an asterisk there, explain yourself. You can see I tried, didn't go that well, so you can try yourself. And then also finally, always check your code. Obviously, if you're rapidly prototyping, fine. But if you are trying to, release production code, then we're going to say check it. So yeah, all the code is available here. You can have a look on the GitHub. I don't know if I can share this presentation out later. I'll try. And then yeah, you can use this repository I have listed like all the prompts I was using. In the Git, it will tell you like ran agent 1, ran agent 2, or whatever. So you can go in there. And yeah, that's all. Thank you. Any questions? Questions?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, a simple question.
Yeah.
Is the answer deterministic?
No, but I think V0 is pretty deterministic, but I did absolutely find that if you run the same prompt several times, you might get different results.
Don't take my photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very averse. So,
Yeah.
for how many percent of the time that it is deterministic in your experience?
I'd say that depending on how V0 is very good at actually being deterministic when you give it not a lot, right? Once you start using your own workflows that are shown locally, it really depends how strict you are, right? If you say to it like, oh, I don't really like the vibe of this page, can you change it? Obviously you're gonna get 10 different results 10 times. V0 is interestingly, I think because they have that very structured way, they're basically implementing the reasoning themselves, right? So they know when the user says this is what we're gonna do, right? I actually don't know, do you want deterministic behavior or not? I'm not sure, because sometimes it is nice to be able to say, I want to see 5 different versions of this UI, right? So yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I asked the question is because depending on what kind of use case they were doing, so in cybersecurity, the answer has to be deterministic.
Yeah.
Period. It's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll take one last question because we have 2 more sessions. So yeah,
okay. So Xiaxian, right? I know it's basically kind of taking over the front end, but it has a quite distinct kind of look and feel. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's very easy to tell whether something is built with Xiaxian. Some of our, because I'm from professional surveys, some of our clients would like to maintain their own design language, right? So Xiaxian make it kind of difficult to customize to fit in the requirement. What do we do? What's your recommendation if that's the case?
So I would say that in that case, if you are going to, for example, go down the route that I said of creating your own registry to extend it, right? You can extend it completely. You don't have to use any, you can start with just divs and raw CSS if you want to, right? So you still have the option to do that. Obviously, it's going to be very painstaking because you're not going to have the ability to start with all the buttons, all the hover states, all the whatever primary, secondary colors that it would give you out of the box. Yeah. So, in that case, I guess I don't really have a great answer for you. Yeah, I would just say that you can do it from scratch if you want to. Personally, I still like the look and feel of Xiaxian way better than Material UI. So, if you think a few years ago, every app kind of looked like it was made by Google. Now every app looks like it was made by Vercel, right? Even ChatGPT, right? They are obviously using Xiaxian, right? Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt you. So you can ask these questions after all the sessions are done. So yeah, the speakers will still be here, and then you can chat. So quickly we'll go to the next one. So Dhruv will